I'm going to show you how I made this security camera in Blender. You're going to watch me do the whole thing, pick up a couple of tips, and you're going to see it's not that difficult. You can probably do this thing yourself as well. Now, I'm going to use this camera later on to do some client outreach. So if you want to learn how to do that, if you want to learn how to get some paid work as a professional 3D artist, we teach this stuff inside my Blender course. So you can go check that out with the link in the description. Now let's get to work. We're going to go to front view, and with Shift A, we're going to add a new image reference. I got a picture of this camera right here that I downloaded from the company's website. I'm going to throw that in the background on the Y-axis like this. Then in the object data properties, I'll check opacity and reduce this a little bit to something like 0.5. Now in front view, I'm just going to lift this up a little bit so that this middle black part is aligned with the X-axis. And we're going to start by creating this part over here in the middle. So with Shift A, I'm going to add a new UV sphere. And this UV sphere has to have 96 segments and 32 rings. This is very important. Now go to edit mode and rotate this around the X-axis by 90 degrees so that the pole is facing you. You're supposed to have one pole in the front and another one in the back. And in edit mode still, we're going to lower this down a little bit to around here somewhere. We're going to try to make it so that the curvature of this sphere down here at the bottom matches the curvature of what we see here in the reference. So in this case, we got to scale it down just a little bit further. Then in edge select mode, we're going to select these two edge loops over here and do Control E, mark seam. Once you do that, then in face select mode, we're going to press L to select the entire top half and delete all the faces there. And let's also select this edge loop here in the middle and mark seam. Now we're going to select this surface over here on the back side, and we're going to delete faces. That way we only have to work with the front, and then we can copy that over to the back side. Now we're going to select this edge loop over here and Control E, mark seam, and then select these edges over here on the side, which are approximately intersecting with this corner. You're going to do the same thing over here on the other side. Control E, mark seam, select this surface over here which is 2 edges wide, inset that with I, set the thickness to something like 0.02, then take these edges here and slide them down a little bit more. Take this vertex over here and slide it inwards with double G by a factor of 0.3. Do the same thing over here on the other side. Now we screwed up because when we inset this, we also inset this surface in the back here, and we don't want to have this little face segment over here. So we're going to undo a couple of steps to before we inset this. Now we're going to inset again, but we're going to press B to disable the boundary over here in this menu. That's going to make it so that we don't have faces over here at the end of this hemisphere or quarter sphere or whatever. Set the thickness once again to 0.02. Slide this inwards with double G by 3 units. Do the same thing over here on the other side. Now select this vertex and select this one. You're going to join those two with J. Take the edges we had from before, but not the first and the last one. You're going to slide those inwards with double G. Then do the same thing over here on the bottom side. Slide these edges, select everything, merge vertices by distance. Now select this surface over here to extrude. Right click, Alt S to push this inwards a little bit. We're going to take these edges over here and slide them inwards a little bit more with double G. Delete these faces in the back. Place a 3D cursor over here on this vertex and set the 3D cursor as the pivot point. Now you're going to select these vertices on the inside and scale them to 0 on the Y-axis to make sure that this is all aligned. Select this entire area where we have this little trench here, and with P you're going to separate that to a new object. Now select this vertex over here on the sphere and snap the 3D cursor right there. Then select this object which we just separated here and go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D cursor. Now the origin point is over here. We're going to go to front view and place the 3D cursor on the origin point. Select everything in edit mode and press Alt E, click on spin. Set the number of steps to 48 and check use duplicates. Now with L you're going to select only the segments here which you want to keep. So you're going to get all the way to over here. Then press Control I, delete faces. Select everything and merge vertices by distance. You can do that with M and merge by distance, but for me the shortcut is Shift W. Now go back to this round surface that we have left over from the UV sphere and select this entire surface down here with L. Delete faces, join these two objects with Control J, merge vertices by distance, and now we successfully created the bottom part of this camera. Zoom over here on this side of this shape, and you're going to activate your knife tool with K and snap that to this vertex on the corner down here. Click to activate the cut, press Z for Z axis, then press C to cut through and click up here above the shape, hit enter. While this is still selected, press Control E, mark seam. Now in face select mode, you can select these two surfaces and delete faces. At this point, it's a good idea to select the entire right half of this and delete all the geometry there. Now if you want to, you can use a mirror modifier, but I'm going to clean this shit up first. We have some vertices here which are very close to each other, which we have to get rid of. And here's how you can get rid of spare vertices. There are some vertices which make up the curve, such as these two right here. There is an angle difference between the edges on the two sides of this vertex. But over here we have a vertex which is not sitting at an angle. So these two edges here are more or less completely parallel, which means we can get rid of this vertex either by sliding it down here with double G, or by bringing it up here and then sliding this one up to that point. In this case, I think it's better to slide it down here. Then we're also going to get rid of this one, but we're going to slide that up to the top here. This one is also going to move upwards. Now slide this up to the top and also bring these two vertices down to this one. This one we're going to slide up to the top, and we're going to keep doing this until we removed all the problematic vertices. We're going to have a couple of triangles over here, but that's not a problem. I'm trying to avoid having really small faces or vertices which are very close to each other. Now place a 3D cursor over here in the middle, shift the right scale to -1 on the x-axis and correct the normals, merge vertices by distance, and we're also going to place the 3D cursor over here on a vertex in the back and also duplicate this across the y-axis like this. In this case, we can just fill this with an n-gon because it's going to be a lot easier. And now at the front here, we have to make this surface flat. So everything inside of this border, which we marked here as a seam, has to be completely flat in the front here, which means we can just select this surface and delete it, place the 3D cursor over here and select these vertices on both the left and the right side, scale them to 0 on the y-axis to line this up. Now you can select all the geometry over here and fill that with F. It might be a better idea to delete some of this stuff from the side first and then fill that in later, because that way we can extrude this upwards to around here somewhere. Now we're just going to take this edge loop and extrude it and lift it up on the z-axis and scale it to -1 on the z-axis so that it inverts. That way we can line it up with the top part of this camera over here. And we're going to need a whole lot of geometry over here on the front, so we're going to add a whole bunch of loop cuts. We need enough loop cuts to turn everything into square tiles. As you can see, all the tiles are now more or less squares. I don't want to have anything like this where we have really long faces. If you have squares, it's going to be much easier to work with the model. Over here at the top, we're going to take this edge loop and extrude it backwards. We're going to try to make it so that it meets this vertex over here. So place the cursor right here and scale this to 0 on the y-axis. Now place the cursor on these bottom two vertices and extrude this edge to 0 on the z-axis. Now I was hoping that there's going to be a way to make a nice little curved surface over here, but that's going to be too difficult because we don't have matching geometry. The edge loop here at the top does not have the same number of edges as the edge loop at the bottom, but I think it's going to be better if we just place a loop cut right here and delete these faces. And now we're going to place the 3D cursor over here on the corner and take some edges from the side, extrude right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis, do the same thing on the other side and make sure to select the same number of edges. Now you can take this top edge loop and lift it up a little bit, extrude this surface and bring it over to the back. Now take this and align it with the top right here. We can fill this with F, and now it's hard to say what this is really supposed to look like, so I'm just going to put an n-gon here for now, and I'm going to select this entire surface over here at the front, but without selecting the edge segment at the bottom. That way I can just push this forwards a little bit, then I'll deselect the next face loop and push it forward a little bit more, and I'll do it one more time after deselecting another face loop. That way I'm going to have this little curve, and that's going to improve the shading at the bottom of this camera. I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at the reference image, you can see that this part is slightly shaded. It looks to me like it's a little bit curved. I think it's going to be a pretty cool detail. Next, we're going to try to make some of the details on the face of this camera. Now we're going to add this surface to the side over here, which has multiple lenses. To do that, we're going to select the face over here in the corner. I got two faces left between this and the top edge over here. And then I'm going to select another face down here at the bottom with Control Shift right click. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to leave a bit of a bigger gap. So down here, I have 4 faces left to the bottom. Now give me X delete faces. And we're going to select an edge over here, Control right click, select an edge on the other side. Right now, we got 18 edges selected. So I'm going to place a 3D cursor between these two vertices with Shift S, and with Shift A, I'm going to add a circle which is going to have 2 times 18 edges. So that's going to be 36 edges. We're going to scale this down and flip it sideways like this. Delete the lower half of the circle. Now select the circle and select the same 18 edges which we had selected before. W bridge edge loops, but you have to be in edge select mode for this bridge edge loops tool to work. Now I'll select this semicircle right here and Shift D right click, scale it to -1 on the Z axis. That's going to invert the semicircle so I can bring it down here to the bottom. And down here, I'm going to select another 18 edges like this. Then select the semicircle, then go W bridge edge loops. We just have to lift the circle up a little bit so we don't get too much stretching. Although I think it's probably going to work better if we disconnect this by undoing a couple of steps. And then we delete an extra segment down here at the bottom so we can lower this down a little further. Now we can select a different set of edges here so we can bridge the edge loops and there's going to be less stretching on the faces on the sides. Now the rest is pretty easy. We're just going to place a 3D cursor on this first vertex and the semicircle. Select all the vertices between the top and the bottom and extrude right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. Fill these two edges with F and fill these two the same way. Then do the same thing over here on the other side. Extrude this, scale to 0 on the x-axis. fill this part down here, and fill this part up here. Now we might want to make this whole surface a little bit bigger, and to do that we first have to make a little bit more space on the surrounding geometry. So first we're going to select all these edges right here and slide them to the left a little bit with double G. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but we're not going to select the top and the bottom vertices on this line right here. We're just going to slide the vertices in between outwards a little bit like this. Now select this gap, fill it with F, press I for inset, and press O for outset. That's going to expand everything outwards pretty evenly. And now you can dissolve the edges on the inside. We're going to inset, but only slightly, so we can get an extra little edge here in between. Select this gap between the inner surface and the outer surface and extrude that backwards like this. Delete the faces at the bottom. Now we have this little gap here, and that's going to make this look a lot nicer because now we can bevel this edge. We can also bevel the edge on the outside, but we still got to create the lenses themselves. And to do that, I think it's best if we delete this face right here and select this semicircle at the top. Shift D, right click. We're going to separate this to new object, place the 3D cursor right here, and we're going to duplicate this and rotate it around the y-axis by 180 degrees, so we have a full circle again. We're going to scale that down a bit. Well, now we got to join this back together so we can connect everything. Select the top half of this circle and these edges on the inside of this hole right here. W, bridge edge loops. Now we're going to connect a few more of the edges over here on the sides, and after that we're going to place the 3D cursor in the middle of the circle, take these vertices here and extrude right click and scale them out like this. I'll delete this edge over here and give me a loop cut like this. Now the geometry here isn't really aligned in a way that we can connect this circle to the outside too well, but we can do whatever we want with the geometry here because it's completely disconnected from this surface. So we're going to separate that to a new object by selection. Now place the cursor right here and select these edge loops, scale to 0 on the z-axis. Do the same thing with the next step like this, and we're going to do it one more time for this next vertex. Now if we want to, we can even select all of these edges which don't participate in the circle. Deselect the edge rings that go all the way around the entire object, then press X, dissolve edges. The lines remain straight, and now we can start creating geometry from scratch so we can connect the circles to the rim. Let's delete half of this object by selecting a vertex at the top and a vertex exactly at the bottom. Shift S, cursor to selected. Now give me 2 loop cuts like this, and we're going to scale those to 0 with the 3D cursor. Now we know this is exactly one half of the shape, so we can delete the lower half. Now with Shift D, we're going to duplicate this and rotate it by 180 degrees around the y-axis. Merge vertices by distance. Now we have the same shape down here at the bottom. I'm going to take this circle and lower it down a little bit. This circle at the bottom has to be a little bit smaller, and it also has to be a little bit higher up like this. To clean this up a little bit, I'm going to place the 3D cursor right here and lift this up and scale it to 0 on the z-axis so it's aligned here. And now I'm going to select the surfaces on the sides and deselect the horizontal edges. Now I can just go W loop tool space to straighten this out a little bit better. And now let's connect this circle to the sides. Now we can connect the bottom part of this circle to the top part of this circle. We got 12 edges here, so we're also going to select 12 edges on this circle. Then select these 12 up here and go W bridge edge loops. Now we have to count the remaining vertices here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have a middle, so 3 more on the underside. That's going to be 7 vertices in total. So we're going to align this edge right here with the middle of this circle. We're going to bevel this with Control B and scroll until we have exactly 7 cuts. In the bevel menu right here, that's going to be 6 segments. Once you have that, you can select these edges and the 6 edges on the inside and go W bridge edge loops. We're going to fill this here with F, and let's also connect the lower part right here. So we got 12 edges, and we're going to find the next 12 edges up here. 24 edges in total, so W bridge edge loops. Fill this here with a quad, and now we can select all the edges exactly in the middle. Control E, mark seam, select this with L. Control I to invert selection. We're going to delete the right side. Now select everything, Shift D, right click, scale to -1 on the x-axis. Merge vertices by distance, correct the normals, and now you have 3 circles where you're going to be able to create the lenses. Before we start working on the lenses, let's also make this little circle down here. To do that, we're first going to add another loop cut over here just so we get rid of these long faces. And now before we start working on the lenses, let's talk about this hole down here at the bottom. The problem is that we have geometry here which doesn't really allow us to create a circle. Using a boolean would make it very difficult to clean this up, and we also have this little curved surface down here, so that's just not worth the effort. Instead, we're going to be able to make this little detail using a normal map and some textures later on. So we're going to fool the viewer into thinking there's a hole here, but there's actually not going to be a hole. It's going to be made by textures. That's the same technique that we're going to use later on for these holes right here. Of course, we're not actually going to model these holes. We're just going to make it look like there's holes the same way I did when I modeled the Apple Vision Pro. Let's also make a big hole over here in the middle. Before we do that, let's select the entire right side and delete all the faces there. Now we're going to place the 3D cursor in the middle and duplicate everything and mirror it across the x-axis. Then select a surface like this. We're going to extrude right click and scale down, then use W loop tool circle. Now the circle tool is fucked up, so sometimes it's going to give you problems like this. To fix that, we're just going to select this inner area and scale it down a little further. Now we're going to take the circular surface and extrude it inwards a little bit. You can delete the faces at the bottom, then take this edge loop over here and bevel that with Control B. Now we prepared the surface in the front. Now we're going to start adding some lenses. Now you can't really tell what this lens looks like on the inside, so we're gonna have to get a little bit creative and make our own lens. Luckily, this shit is pretty simple. You just gotta extrude a circle a little bit on the inside, you put a piece of glass over the top, and for the most part, you're gonna be good to go. So let's take this circle over here and zoom in on that. You're gonna fill this with F and just extrude it inwards a little bit. After that, we're gonna inset it and extrude it some more. This first step over here is where you're gonna place the glass. After that, we're gonna inset this again a little bit further in like this, then extrude it down, slide this edge loop inwards with double G, and now give me a couple of loop cuts right here. With Control B, we're gonna bevel those loop cuts. I'm gonna turn each of these edge loops into 2 edge loops with the bevel, and now just select these face loops in between, and with individual origins, we're gonna scale this down on the y-axis. That's gonna make these little steps here. Now we can do something else on the inside. I think there's not much more that we can add here. Maybe we'll make another loop cut like this and extrude this outwards a little bit more. And now this is pretty much just supposed to be a dark hole. I don't know what's gonna be on the inside, but no one's gonna be able to see this anyway. Now we have to add the glass, and to do that, we're gonna place the 3D cursor right over here in the middle of the top segment. Then with Shift A in object mode, we're gonna add a UV sphere. That UV sphere has to have 36 segments because that's the number of edges we have around the hole. Now we're gonna delete the lower half of the UV sphere, scale this all the way down so it fits into this hole, rotate sideways by 90 degrees. Now adjust the size just a little bit, and we're gonna scale this down on the y-axis like this. And now once we have one piece of glass, we can just duplicate it and place it over here. So place the cursor on the next hole, Shift D, right click, snap this to the 3D cursor, and then do the same thing one more time down here at the bottom. We're gonna have to scale this one down a little bit. Of course, we have to fill up the inside of this hole. So let's move this out of the way. Select this face in the middle, and with Control Plus, you're gonna expand your selection until you get the entire thing. Now duplicate this with Shift D and P to separate this to a new object. Place the 3D cursor in the middle of the outermost circle here, then place the origin point of this drum into the 3D cursor with object set origin 3D cursor. Then place the 3D cursor into this next hole and snap this to the 3D cursor. Do the same thing one more time at the bottom. Now you can bring the lenses back and join everything together. You can duplicate all of this over to the other side. The middle lens here can be made using exactly the same technique, except this time we're going to need more edges to the UV sphere. So if you count the edges around this circle, you can see we got 62 edges. So the UV sphere has to have 62 segments. And once we added the big lens, now we can select all the sharp edges around this block. With Control B, we're going to bevel all these edges, set the number of segments to 2 and the shape value to 1. That way you get a nice sharp corner, so you basically just added some edges around your edges. The point of this is that when you go to Object Shade Smooth, the shading around the edges is going to be a lot more realistic. You also got to make sure to bevel all the other sharp edges, such as these at the bottom, and I'm going to do that by selecting all the face segments on the insides of these trenches, and then I'll go up here to select loops, select boundary loops. Then with Control B, I can bevel this again, and now the smooth shading is going to be contained within those bevels. Next, let's talk about the outer part, which is holding this camera. So that's this shit on the sides right here. Now to make the fork that holds the camera, whatever the fuck you call this thing, we're going to use a UV sphere again, but we're going to align it differently. So we're going to add a UV sphere, but this time we're going to rotate it around the y-axis by 90 degrees because we need the poles to be on the left side and the right side instead of in the front and the back. Now scale this down a little bit so it lines up with the sides right here. We're going to lower it down to around here somewhere. Once again, we're going to select the top half of the sphere and we're going to get rid of that. We're going to cut this in half one more time, so we're going to get rid of the left side. And now we're going to select everything up until somewhere around here. X delete faces, then take this top segment, extrude, right click, scale it to 0 on the Z axis while the 3D cursor is on the top here somewhere. Now we can fill this with F and extrude it inwards a little bit like this, and that's pretty much the basic shape that you're looking for here. You can adjust the height of this if you want to. For example, you can lower this down a little bit if you want these two circles to align like this. And now with Control R, we're going to add a couple of loop cuts around here. Right now I got only squares. I'm going to need more geometry than this, so I'm going to add more loop cuts like this. And now once we subdivide this, we're going to have to make this a little bit smoother. So we're going to select an edge segment from here and to the middle. Then you're going to go up here to select loops and click on edge rings right here. That's going to select all the edges which are perpendicular to the face loop on which this edge is placed. So now you can go W loop tools, relax. That's going to make everything nice and smooth. So now we can add more loop cuts over here to turn this into squares, and that's going to give us a little bit more geometry here. The reason we needed more geometry here is so we can place a circular hole here, and that's where you're going to have a screw which is going to attach this to something else. So place the 3D cursor right here. You're going to go to side view and you're going to add a new circle with Shift A. That circle has to have 8 vertices. Align that with your view and scale it down to somewhere around this size. Fill this with F and bring it out to around here somewhere. Now you're going to add a new modifier from the deform section. Click on shrink wrap, target this surface here with the eyedropper and set the wrap method to project. Now G to move and double Z to move along the local Z axis, so you can project this onto the surface like this. That way it's going to have a perfectly circular shape if you look at it from the side. So now you can apply this with Control A. Join these two objects together, select this vertex in the middle here and delete it, and now you can just fill the faces like this. Extrude this inwards on the x-axis and scale it to 0. And now we're going to have to do this on a few more points down here. So I'm going to place one hole here, one down at the bottom, and another one over here. I'm just going to repeat the same technique one more time because the shape here is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to duplicate this hole and bring it down here to the bottom. It turns out that the geometry at the bottom doesn't really allow us to have this type of shape down here, so fuck it. We're just not going to put this there. We're going to put it over here on the other side. So let's make some space over there, bring this over to the other side, correct the normals, merge vertices by distance, and now this shape should be good to go. I am going to add a little bit of subdivision surface to make these holes look a little bit smoother. So let's start with Control 1 to add one level of subdivision. Let's select all the sharp edges and bevel them with Control B like this. You also want to bevel the edges around the holes. Now go Object, Shade Smooth, copy this entire thing over to the other side, and we're also going to need this circle around the top. So with Shift A, we're going to add another circle. Let's do 128 vertices so we don't have to use a subdivision surface modifier. We're going to make sure that this matches the curve on the side of this object right here. Now fill with F, extrude it up and scale this part up a little bit. Now you're going to take both of these edge loops and bevel them with Control B, Object, Shade Smooth. And the only thing we have left for the bottom part of this camera is this little wall over here and this cylinder in the middle. So I'm going to take an edge from over here and separate that to a new object. Place the 3D cursor right here and lower this down a little bit further so we match the height here. Now you're going to duplicate this edge and rotate by 90 degrees. Fill this with F, extrude to give it a little bit of thickness, bevel with Control B to contain the shading, place the 3D cursor in the middle, and of course you're going to duplicate this over to the other side as well. And now we're going to select this vertex and the same vertex on the other side. Place the 3D cursor between those vertices, and with Shift A, we're going to add a cylinder. We're going to scale that cylinder down, flip it sideways, make it a little bit longer. Now we're going to make it stick out here just a little bit, then only select the faces in the front and the back, and with individual origins, you're going to inset with I, then extrude out a little bit more. Now you can inset again if you want to and extrude a little bit more. Select one of the sharp edges, go Shift G, select similar face angles, Control B to bevel this again just to contain the shading, Object, Shade Smooth. And now apart from the textures, the bottom part of this camera is ready to go. Let's quickly make the top part and then we're going to move on to the textures. The materials on this object are about as simple as they can get. We got some black plastic, we got some glass, we got some white plastic which has a company name, that's it. You can put this together in 40 seconds by going over to Canva, and in Canva they're going to let you make your own textures. You can go to create a design, custom size. Let's do 1024 by 1024, we're not going to need more than that. Now click over here and just give me a white background. Give me a text box. We're going to type in an imaginary company name so we don't get sued. Make the text box a little bit bigger, go up here to file, download, that's it, we got a texture. This shit is also really easy to set up. You just got to go to the shading workspace, add a new material, go to texture view to see what you're doing. With Shift A, I'm going to add an image texture node where I'm going to open up the image which we just downloaded, plug the color into base color. Now since I want the text to be right over here, I'm going to select this surface and I'm going to press U, unwrap, and over here in the UV editor I'm going to adjust the UV map so I can place the logo correctly, reduce the roughness a little bit to make it shiny. And for the camera itself, we're going to need a new material which we're going to name plastic. Give me a dark gray color, increase the roughness a little bit on this, and just to make it look better, I'm going to add a noise texture node. Also give me a color ramp node, plug the color into factor right here, then add a bump node, then plug the color into height and the normal into normal, increase the scale, increase the roughness, increase the detail. We're going to reduce the strength in the bump node, and now you're going to make this look like rough plastic because if you look very closely, it's a bumpy surface. We're going to apply the same material to this outside part here and the ring at the top. Then I want to have a glass material, so I'm going to select all the lenses like this with L in edit mode, add a new material, assign it there, click here, name that glass. In the shader editor, we're going to open up transmission and crank up the weight, and we're going to reduce the roughness to almost 0. And now if you switch to cycles and you go to render view, this is going to look like glass, so you're pretty much good to go. I might adjust this later by adding some more stuff inside of the camera lens so you can see something on the inside. For example, maybe I'll make the material a little bit more reflective, or maybe I'm going to add a few more lighter materials on the inside. But anyway, once you got glass, you're pretty much halfway there. Now the tricky part is when you got to add these holes down here, and that's going to be a whole different story because we're going to have to make those with normal maps. We're also going to have to make some roughness maps. So we got some modeling to do. We're going to have to bake that shit and we're going to have to apply it to the surface so it looks like there's holes, but there's not actually going to be holes. If you know how to do that properly, you're going to be able to add a whole bunch of details to your model without actually modeling them. Let's do that in the next chapter. First, we're gonna zoom in on this surface over here and select the surface. We can deselect some stuff at the top here, but this is where we're supposed to have the first set of holes. So we're gonna duplicate this, and with P separated to new object, we're gonna lift the camera up out of the way so we only have this little surface. Now we're gonna duplicate this again and hide the copied version with H. And to make the holes, we're first gonna need some more geometry. So with Control 1, give me one level of subdivision, apply the subdivision surface, select 4 faces over here, then move 1 block and select 4 more. Do the same thing one more time and do the same thing over here on the left side. And now you're gonna move 1 row below and you're gonna do the same thing again. Now once we selected a 5x5 grid, we're gonna add 3 more spots over to the left side and 3 more on the right side. But it turns out that we got some more or less visible holes over here, which are a little bit more shallow. So let's also take care of those. And once you do that, you pretty much got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9x5 grid. And again, you gotta make sure that your geometry allows you to select this type of pattern. Now we're gonna inset with I, then go W loop tool circle. Now you got a bunch of little circles here which you can extrude backwards, but you only want to extrude them backwards a little bit like this. This is going to be the shallow holes. Now we got to get the big holes, but we got to push them a little bit further in. Now to get the deeper holes, we got to get rid of the shallow holes first in the selection. So deselect both of these sides like this and 2 more at the top here. Extrude this a little bit further back. And now we got to add some materials so we can turn this into a roughness map as well. So I'm going to get rid of the materials that I have here previous. I'm going to create a new material. This material has to be black, but while I still have the bottom of the deep hole selected, I'm going to add another material here which is going to be white. Assign that to the bottom of these holes, and since it's white on a roughness map, this is going to mean full roughness, which means the bottom of this hole is not going to reflect any light. It's just going to be completely black. So now let's add a bit more subdivision surface to this surface to make the holes rounder. Then with Shift A, we're going to add a plane and we're going to flip that sideways and place it right here, right next to this surface. In the shader editor, you're going to select the plane and add a new material to that. Add a new image texture node right there and generate a new image. You're going to name this holes 1, set the generated type to blank and check 32-bit float, and then click new image. Set the color space to non-color. Now select the surface and shift select the plane. Make sure that you're in cycles to do this correctly. Scroll down here to bake in the render properties tab. Open it up, set the bake type to normal. Check selected to active, set the margin to 2. Now you can preview this holes 1 image over here. Hit bake. Wait a couple of seconds, contemplate your life, and before you know it, you're gonna get a texture right here which shows you the holes on a normal map. So if we now add a normal map node here and we plug this into color and we plug the normal into normal here on this plane, you're gonna see that we now have some holes on this plane. If we make the material a little bit darker, you can see this a little better. Now you want to save this image to your computer with this little menu over here. Go to image, save as. I made a new folder in my textures tab which I named security camera. I'm gonna name this image holes 1 normal. Then I'm gonna get rid of this image and generate a new one. This is going to be called holes 1 roughness, and this time you're going to go down to the bake section and you're going to change the bake type from normal to diffuse right here. Now uncheck direct and indirect, click bake and wait a couple more seconds, and now we got this image over here which we're going to be able to use as a roughness map for these holes. So save this image, and by the way, we're also going to be able to use this as a color map. We just have to invert the colors so we have white with black holes. Now let me show you how to apply this correctly, and then you're going to be able to figure out how to do everything else. We're going to zoom in on this area down here, and let's get rid of any nodes that we have in this material for now. Now with Shift A, we're going to add a new image texture. We're going to use the open button to load in the holes normal map that we just baked. With Shift A, we're going to add a normal map node and plug the color into color, normal into normal. With U, you're going to unwrap this and make sure that it's adjusted in the UV map down here. That way you're going to be able to see some holes on this surface, as you can see right here right now. You don't want to have holes anywhere else, so you're going to press Control I and take every other part of this UV map and scale it down and just put it over some area like this down here. Now with another image texture node, you're going to open up the roughness map. You're going to plug the color into roughness right here, and now as you can see, everything is shiny except the insides of these holes. We're going to add a brightness contrast node right here, and we're going to use that to adjust this a little bit. So we're going to increase the brightness here to make the surrounding part not that shiny. Then we're going to add an invert color node and plug this roughness map into the invert color node. Then open up specular and plug the invert color node into IOR level, and we're going to duplicate the brightness texture node so we can use that down here as well. As you know, we want the bottom of this hole to reflect no light at all, so we're going to increase the contrast a little bit, then decrease the brightness. Then we're going to move this aside, duplicate the invert color node, plug the color from the roughness map, and I also want to make the color down here completely black, so I'm going to plug the roughness map into base color. I'm going to bring in the invert node, and then I'm going to load up a brightness contrast node, increase the contrast, reduce the brightness for the whole thing. As you can see, now we got gray on the surrounding, but we got black on the inside of the hole. We can reduce the brightness this a little bit further to make the surrounding part darker. And just like that, we got some holes. The reason you're seeing this shading shit going on down here is because we have a transparent background. I'll take care of that later by using a bucket tool to paint the background black. Then it's all going to be the same. Then this is going to be smooth. And I did exactly the same shit to make all these other holes around this model, such as up here and these holes down here. Now I'm going to prepare some footage and cool animations with this model, and I'm going to use that to reach out to a company, and I'm going to document the entire process, and I'm going to show that inside the digitally enhanced program. So if you want to see how to do outreach the right way, then check out the program with the link below. And we're also going to help you build your own portfolio and conduct yourself like a professional, so that when you reach out to somebody, you can do it properly. And you're not just going to get ghosted by sending out 100 copy-paste DMs like a fucking idiot. If you want to ask me a question, you can always reach me on Instagram. There's also going to be a link for that in the description below. Make sure to join my free Discord. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the fucking channel. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. I'll see you in the next one.